Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the comments from my friend from Fairfax, but I'll tell you, the problem is with some of us is the level of trust that a lot of us in Northern Virginia feel about how Northern Virginia is treated, and I also think this budget has a lot of problems with priorities. I'm going to talk about those two things. First of all, I'll give the governor some credit. When I was elected 3 sessions ago, we were presented with a budget which changed the way we historically funded schools, and we weren't going to re-benchmark, and that created a whole lot of issues. And Governor McDonnell came in and proposed that we actually do what we've been doing for years and re-benchmark, and that was something that benefited Northern Virginia. Many of us appreciated him stepping up, stepping to the plate, and following through on that. However, we got a budget this year which attempted to undo a deal that was done years ago, which is the cost to compete. And it's part of a constant theme that many of us see, which is a lot of ways Northern Virginia feels as if it's the cash machine for the entire state in a lot of respects. This cost to compete was a deal that was cut, and obviously part of it's been restored, but all of it hasn't. It's still short. And again, that goes to the level of trust that a lot of people feel about how this body treats certain parts of the state and why this budget continues to have problems because of its priorities. That cost to compete isn't restored. In fact, I'm pretty sure, I haven't seen the numbers yet, but I'm pretty sure we're still not funding K through 12 at the same levels we did in 07 because the budget hasn't recovered, but a lot of us feel that K through 12 deserves more than we've done, and we know it's come up a lot. This budget has gotten a lot better. I appreciate the work the conferees have done. This budget's come a long way from the beginning, but we're still not even funding K through 12 where we did in 07. What other kinds of priorities are in this budget? It reflects a lot of these tax credits that a lot of us have problems with. Now the ship has sailed on some of that stuff, but these tax credits are baked into this budget. And it seems like a lot of people got tax credits except for my constituents. There's also pork baked into this budget for some people. I'm not going to name names, but there's some projects in this budget that don't need to be in there. And there's certainly a lot of things that I would have liked to have for my district in this budget, but it ain't in there. But there are more important things to fund. Let me talk about this foreclosure settlement, which we just heard about. I talked about this earlier, and again, this goes to the level of trust and the level of priorities. Over the last decade, hundreds, thousands, nationally, millions of people had their pockets picked by a bunch of out-of-control banks, and a bunch of out-of-control mortgage lenders, by an out-of-control process. They ended up without a house, they ended up with ruined credit, they ended up with massive debts. A lot of people ended up homeless. And that happened in Virginia. It didn't happen more often in some parts of this state than others. And it just so happened it happened more often in Northern Virginia than just about any other part of the state because of the housing boom we experienced. And it also happened in Loudoun big time, it happened in Prince William, it happened in Stafford. There was a lot of it that went on in Henrico, a lot of it in Fairfax County. And because of that behavior, a lawsuit was brought, and a court order was entered, and a settlement was made. It's the second biggest settlement in the history of this country. The first biggest settlement was the tobacco settlement. And what did this body do when it got the money for the tobacco settlement? It set up a special fund to help the people that got hurt, the folks in Southside and Southwest, and that was the right thing to do. Now, when there's a settlement that benefits our part of the state, that helps a lot of people that got hurt in our part of the state, what happens? 5, 10% of the money gets put in a trust fund, and the rest of it gets thrown in the kitty.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a question?
Gentleman yield.
I'll be happy to yield when I'm done. Just finish, make a couple more points. Now I have here I was curious about this water quality allocation, okay? And I went and looked up the court order for this settlement. It's 300 pages long. Subsection B, state payment settlement amounts. And it says, this is a court order signed by our Attorney General on behalf of the people of Virginia. I'm not sure anybody's read it besides me, but I thought it was important to look at. And it says, each state Attorney General shall designate the uses of the funds as set forth in this attached exhibit. To the extent practical, the funds shall be used for purposes intended to avoid preventable foreclosures, to ameliorate the effects of the foreclosure crisis, to enhance law enforcement efforts to prevent and prosecute financial fraud or unfair or deceptive acts or practices, and to compensate the states for costs resulting from the alleged unlawful conduct of the defendants. Such permissible purposes for allocation of the funds include, but not limited to, supplementing the amounts paid to state homeowners under the Borrower Payment Fund, funding for housing counselors, state and local foreclosure assistance hotlines, state and local foreclosure mediation programs, legal assistance, housing remediation, and anti-blight projects, funding for training and staffing of financial fraud or consumer protection efforts, and civil penalties. Accordingly, each Attorney General has set forth the general instructions for the fund in the attached exhibit, and under Virginia, it says it was designated under the Attorney General designated to go into the Attorney General Civil Enforcement Fund. We signed a court order that said we're going to use the money for that purpose. And instead, I guess it's going to water quality. That's not right. Not only is it a breach of faith to these people who it was intended for, it's a violation of a court order. Now, we're going to be in court a lot over the next couple of years. We passed a lot of bills this last session, which is going to keep a lot of lawyers busy. So what's, one more? But why is it that people in my part of the state feel abused? It's because of stuff like this. So I appreciate the work. The budget's better, but it still isn't there. Mr. Speaker, I intend to vote against this budget. I know a lot of us over here intend to. This budget could have gone a lot further than it did, and I'd be happy to yield if the gentleman still wants to ask me any questions.